Hey everybody, Dr. Adam here with Yacht in the Apiary. Part of this month's curriculum is beekeeping with disabilities. I'm a disabled vet myself. I have an ankle and knee injury from my time in the Army, and it limits my ability to lift things and kind of twist, which is a common motion that we do when we're working with beehives. So as part of this month's curriculum, you're getting the agribility session that we did last year, which we filmed. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in my own apiary that I use for my own dealing with my own personal disability. So you all have seen this tool right here. I've showed that a lot in some of the other videos. That's the Power Wagon. That has been a really critical piece of equipment that we've had in the apiary over the last few years. It's made by DR, and this is a much older model than the newer models. My parents, we actually got this from, and they'd had this for about 15 years that they had at their little place out in California for some time. But you can see when it comes to lifting things and carrying things out to the apiary, although I can drive right up to the apiary, we move equipment around on the farm with this. And right now you can see there's 26 honey supers stacked on there right now. Well, 26 counting that deep box that you see on the top. So that's a lot of equipment to be able to move. They're full of frames, and there's a lot of weight associated with that. So this is a nice, easy way to move things about. The other thing that I have right here, this is my toolbox. So the toolbox is nice because you can put all your stuff in there and carry it around with you and not have to worry about fumbling around with lots of different things carrying items in it. So that's another critical piece. And then the last piece, and this is what I'm going to show you some use of today in the apiary in this video, is the Captar lift. So this is a lift that I got with a Farmer Veteran Coalition Fellowship. And what it allows me to do is it allows me to clamp anywhere on the hive and lift up from that point. So for example, when we're doing mite inspections, we're really interested in the brood chamber. Now you can see some of these hives back here are 6 or 7 boxes tall. I don't want to necessarily have to pick up all of those boxes because every one of those boxes, when it's full of honey, potentially has about 50 pounds of honey in it. These are 8-frame deeps. And so what we need to keep in mind is that, there are ways to get into beehives that doesn't require so much work as far as lifting is concerned. So I'll show you how I can just clamp right onto that, lift up all the honey supers, and get right into the brood chamber without lifting one box on my own. So some of the accessibility equipment we use here. In addition, the other thing I wanted to point out is our apiary. So you can see that the rows and the spacing between the hives is pretty wide. That allows us to basically get in there with our Power Wagon and move about the apiary easily. It also creates a situation where there's not a lot of tripping hazards around, which is always an issue in the apiary. You can also see the apiary's mowed, and there's literally every tripping hazard that's been in there, as far as little stumps or things like that, have been removed. Because when you're walking around with equipment or you're pulling honey supers off of a hive and you've got all that weight, the last thing you want to do is trip and fall because you can cause some serious injury. So I'm going to take you in the apiary today. I'm going to be doing some inspections today, so I'll probably incorporate that in this video as well. But I'm going to show you mainly how to use this Captar lift and what advantage that has for us using that for accessibility. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed this video. So another big part of dealing with accessibility challenges like service-connected disabilities is being able to accommodate those disabilities. Now, you've seen this tool on many other occasions when I've been making videos. This is my DR Power Wagon right here. And I've shown you in other videos how I utilize this as kind of a table, but here I'm going to illustrate that as I go through this bee colony, how I actually use this. Now, again, my kind of restrictions are related to lifting knee, back, and ankle. And so that twisting motion and going down is a very difficult motion for me to do over and over again. And in an apiary like this, where we have, somewhere around 50 bee colonies, a full day's work of doing that up and down motion just destroys my back. And so this is a good accommodation for that. You can also use a fold-up table. I used to use a small portable fold-up table as well to do this. But now that I'm here in a big apiary here at my own personal farm, this is what we use consistently. So let me show you how this goes about. So I'm going to go ahead and just pop this hive open. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my top cover right on top of there. So this is a migratory cover, so I don't have an inner cover on here. And then we're just going to go through the boxes. And you can see that literally I'm just transferring right over. There's not a lot of twisting. There's not a lot of going down and coming back up. And so that's really good when we're trying to deal with those types of injuries. So we just continue going down this stack of boxes. And now I'm down to my third box here. And we're into the brood chamber. This is where I'm going to do all my inspections and all my business. And you can see that my hive bodies are stacked up nicely next to me, again, so that I'm not having to make that constant up and down motion as I'm twisting. Really saves your back.
great surface to work with. But again, you don't have to have a DR Power Wagon to do this. A small fold-up table can do the same exact thing. The one thing I would recommend, though, is if you're looking for a table, because I went through a couple different versions of tables when we were searching for this, accommodation for us to use in our out apiaries. The thing I'll tell you is make sure they have telescoping legs on them, because generally, I'm not that tall of a guy. I'm 5'7", and so generally I need something that's about, you know, maybe about 30 inches off the ground in order to accommodate really, you know, kind of this motion. If it's a little taller, the boxes just get too high for me. So it's nice to have those telescoping legs to be able to make those adjustments when you need to. Say, for example, you've got a really tall colony you've got to get through. You can get that table lower to the ground and then be able to work up. Or if you only have a few boxes, you can keep it more kind of waist height, that 36-inch height. So again, a great accommodation for the apiary when you're working with disabilities.
So another good accessibility tip is really when you're working in an apiary. Now, you know, you may not have a 50 hive apiary like this one, but when you're working out in an apiary, it's important to realize that you're going to need equipment when you're doing maintenance. And usually that's, you know, supers or, you know, boxes with frames in them. And this is one thing you can always use in an apiary, is just to bring everything out, you know, kind of in one shot. If you're bringing it out to a certain location, you know, bring it all out at once, get that out here, use some sort of device to get it out here, like a truck or something like that, but then stage it in your area. So I usually stage my equipment. It's kind of like middle of the apiary, you can see. So I'm staging it right here. So that I can just kind of walk back and forth from hives to be able to get it without having to make a long trip somewhere else. You know, if you were to have this in a vehicle and you didn't bring it out into the apiary, you'd be making trips back and forth to the vehicle all the time. And that's just added energy that you're expending in the apiary.
So another great accessible tool that you can use in your apiary are hive lifts. For those of us that have lifting restrictions, myself included, having a back injury, knee and ankle injury, you know, a lot of times twisting, picking things up unnecessarily, making more work for myself causes those injuries to flare up. And so a few years back, I started working with Ned Stoller of Agribility, who you saw in the video of last year's workshop, to do a disability assessment for me and my farm based on my disabilities and the work that I do. And this was one of the recommendations that was given, was a hive lift, so that when I'm doing inspections, we talked about this, the important stuff is always down in the brood chamber. You know, looking for space for honey, you can oftentimes do that just looking between the frames, but you're always going to have to get down in that brood chamber, whether it's checking during a hive inspection, doing a mite check, putting on mite treatments, removing mite treatments. You got to get down in there, and a lot of unnecessary lifting really makes things more difficult. Now, this hive right here has a brood chamber that is 3 boxes deep right here, and then it's got 2 honey supers on right now. And so these 2 full honey supers right here, this is a 10-frame hive. This is about 100 pounds of excess weight. Now, I need to get down in here. I like to get into that 3rd box, kind of in the middle of the brood chamber when I'm doing my inspections. So I would have to lift all of this weight of these 3 boxes in 3 individual movements if I were not to use a hive lift. Now, I'm going to show you how this hive lift works and how simple it makes my job. Just for your knowledge, this was about $1,500. I'm guessing about 4 or 5 years ago. I actually got this with a Farmer Veteran Coalition Fellowship. And you hear me talk about FVC all the time and this fellowship opportunity. So for those of you that are dealing with disabilities and see something like this that could make a difference in your beekeeping operation as far as efficiencies, what a great thing to apply for to help you for that. And Farmer Veteran Coalition a lot of times will help fund those projects. So let's see how this works. So essentially, this is made of a few different components. I have a lever back here that is a hand crank that basically raises and lowers the clamps. And you see those clamps raising right there. So I'm going to raise these up right to that 3rd box. The other critical piece of this is this mechanism over here, which is your clamping mechanism. And it just uses a pressurized clamping action to hold these pads right to the hive. Now there's rubberized inserts on the inside of these, and basically it just clamps on real tight and it picks it up by that. This hive has been shown to be able to hold up to, I think it's about 350 to 400 pounds on this mechanism when you're lifting up colonies. So I can lift up pretty much all of my honey supers off of this, never having to lift any box, and be able to do whatever management it is I want down there. So this is how it works here. So I'm going to go ahead and get this real close to the hive. I'm going to go ahead and raise those clamps where they need to be, which in this case, I'm going to have to shift this over just a little bit to get those clamps on just right. I will admit that this is a lot easier to use with deep hive bodies because of how big these clamps are, but they do work with the medium hive bodies. Okay, so we're all clamped up there. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that that propolis is nice and broken loose on there. Okay, and now we're ready to lift our hives. So now I am in the brood chamber. This is exactly where I need to be to do my management, right? So if I need to do a hive inspection, I can literally just take this entire stack of beehives and twist it around here. It's now out of my way, and I can work right here in the center of the colony. Really amazing tool that saves your back over time. There's a lot of variations of this, and in fact, in the talk that you see with Ned, the workshop that we recorded last year, you'll actually see him show you one that he made in his own workshop. So there's plans online to make these with basically with a dolly and a welder. You can make something like this for your own apiary. Generally, like I said, I think this was about $1,500 at the time. I have heard that there is actually a U.S. producer of this. When I purchased this at the time, this came from Hungary, so there was not a place in the United States. There was a vendor in the United States that was selling them, but there wasn't a company manufacturing these. But I've heard over the years, and I don't know of the company myself, but I've heard over the years that there is a U.S. manufacturer now producing something like this. So just another way to make things more accessible. I just lifted over 100 pounds worth of hive material right there, and didn't even, well, I'm breaking a sweat because I'm hot, but I didn't even break a sweat doing that, and I'm saving my back in the meantime. All right, folks, let's go through some more of these accessibility options that you have for the apiary. So another approach to accessibility with beekeeping is a totally different style hive than our traditional Langstroth hive. This is what's known as an AZ or a Slovenian beehive, and this is a kind of an American spin on it. This is produced by Precious Beehives out of Michigan, and was donated to the Heroes to Hives program. And I'm getting this started in my apiary this year. One, to learn how to use it before I start teaching you all on it, but two, to also get it stocked with bees this year so that we can move this out to one of our apiaries around the state so that our Heroes to Hive students can get a chance to work this style of beehive. This is the front of the hive. You can see that there's entrances here that can be rotated to close off entrances. Essentially, this is 3 deeps worth of hive bodies is the height. And as I go into the back of it and show you the back of it, you'll see that they're basically oriented kind of like, they're using Langstroth style frames, but they're oriented in a little bit of a different way. And by that, I mean that they're flipped upside down. So let's go inside and take a look at this and how you actually work one of these beehives, which really, the big advantage of this is it eliminates the need to lift any boxes. So you're essentially just working frames from the back of the hive. So let's take a look in the back. All right, so this is the back of our AZ hive, and basically all you got to do is come here to this latch and open it up. And what you can see back here, and let me just make sure you all can see this as well. Yep, you sure can. You can see all these boxes are essentially deep frames in these boxes. You can see the 2 bottom boxes are completely full of bees right now. These are 8 frames across, so you're looking at about 16 frames of bees currently. But as we want to work this hive, the way that this works is instead of working it from the top like you would a traditional hive, you work it from the back. So for example, if I want to get into here and check and see what's going on, I just come here to this latch, I open up this door, and I have access to all of my frames. Now, the one thing I will say about this is it is my first year ever using one of these hives. I've only used Langstroth hives over the course of my career in beekeeping. And what I can say is the one thing that I have noticed is that this takes a little bit of getting used to of working frames. The reason is because instead of moving up, where essentially you only have about 9 inches to clear, you're moving lengthwise. So you have about 19 inches of frame to clear here. So quite a lot more distance to pull a frame out. But again, if you're dealing with an accessibility issue, like you're wheelchair bound, or you're using a walker, or you just can't lift anything, This is a great accommodation because I never have to lift any boxes. The most I'm going to have to lift is one deep frame. So the way that you come in here, you'll notice these frames are upside down, and that's how they sit in here. But the way that you work that is, like I came in here, I just broke that propolis loose, and then you pull these frames out like so. So again, I never had to lift a box. I can work these frames. They're regular Langstroth frames, which is one of the really nice things I like about these Precious hives, that they use standard Langstroth equipment in here, so you don't have to buy some specialized frame. You know, a lot of these specialty hives, they will have their own kind of spin-on frames, and it makes it, you know, limited where you can get your supplies from. So this is an AZ hive. Work this hive all the way through the back, assemble it from the back. Again, never lifting a hive body at all. A pretty nice accommodation if you're dealing with a lifting restriction. So let's go ahead and put this back together. Again, I'll just put my frame in here. I've already inspected this hive. I came through this the other day and wanted to come back just to get some film for you all. So that's how you would traditionally work that hive, right from the back. And then we just close it up like so. Close up your back box here, and you're all done. Really nice hive.
So the last accommodation that I'm going to mention in this video is the toolbox that I mentioned at the top of the video. And you can see that the nice thing about this is that this allows you to have all of the materials that you're going to need in an apiary present with you, and you don't have to carry all this stuff out individually. You're not fumbling around with it, which, you know, anytime we're fumbling around with anything, there's an opportunity to injure ourselves. So you can see in my toolbox, I've got all sorts of stuff in here. I've got my gloves, I've got all of my alcohol wash kit equipment, things like duct tape, I've got a frame holder, scissors, hive tools, extra markers, or I use ear tags for my hives, and then I've got a whole little area up there at the top left where I put my marking pens as far as when I'm doing queen marking, throw my cell phone in there, and anything else that I might need during a hive inspection. So having all of these things close by in one place really creates an efficiency in the bee yard and also offers you the opportunity to not have to fumble around with equipment while you're in the bee yard. So that's kind of a wrap up on the accommodations that I use in my own bee yard to help with my service-connected disabilities. Hope you all learned something from this, and I really encourage you to take a look at the recorded video of the workshop we did with Agribility last year, where Ned Stoller from Agribility covers a lot more accommodations related to beekeeping with disabilities. Don't ever let anybody tell you that your disabilities are going to prevent you from beekeeping. There are all sorts of accommodations that you can use to really beekeep with any sort of disability that you're faced with. And if you have questions specifically about how to accommodate your disabilities, Michigan Agribility really is the best place to go to. And here is their website. Again, Ned Stoller is the ag engineer who does all of their consulting. He will come out to your farm, do a full disability assessment just like he did with me, and then help you be able to understand how to incorporate those technologies, those accessible technologies, into your own bee yard. I'll tell you from personal experience, it has made a game changer in my own beekeeping operation. It was pretty normal that I would really have some sort of bad injury, usually about twice a year before I started working with Agribility, and that's pretty much gone to nothing. Generally, the injuries would be back injuries or ankle injuries, but again, after these accommodations have been made, that's not something I typically deal with. So I really encourage you to check out Michigan Agribility. Hope you all enjoyed this lecture.